For 15 years, we've all asked the same question: why doesn't Apple make a touchscreen Mac? Every other laptop manufacturer figured it out. Microsoft's done it. Lenovo's done it. Even budget Windows makers have touchscreen options. But Apple said no, touch belongs on iPad, keyboards belong on Mac. That philosophy made sense. Until now. This week, Apple announced a touchscreen MacBook is coming. But here's what's shocking: they're not waiting for the M7 chip to arrive. They're launching it with the M6. That might sound minor, but it's actually a massive signal about where Apple thinks the Mac is heading. Think of it this way: Apple's been treating chip releases like train schedules. Every 3 years, they introduce major design changes timed perfectly to new generations. The MacBook Air redesign, timed to the M1. The Pro overhaul, timed to the M3. But this time, they're not waiting for the next train. They're launching the feature now with current hardware because they've decided the market won't wait any longer. Either the touchscreen tech has finally become essential, or Apple's competitors have gotten too good and the company's in damage control. Either way, this is a turning point in how Apple thinks about the Mac. And here's where it gets interesting: what this decision reveals about Apple's actual priorities. So why has Apple been so stubborn about touchscreens? The answer isn't laziness, it's philosophy. Steve Jobs believed that when you put touch on a laptop, you're solving the wrong problem. If you're sitting at a desk with a trackpad and keyboard, reaching up to touch the screen is awkward and tiring. Your arm gets exhausted. It's called the gorilla arm problem. And for a decade, Jobs was right. Touchscreen Windows laptops were gimmicks. Nobody really wanted them. But something changed around 2018 and 2019. Tablet productivity exploded. The iPad Pro became genuinely useful for creators, and the line between laptop work and tablet work started to blur. Meanwhile, Windows manufacturers invested billions into making touchscreens feel natural. They added precision stylus support. They optimized Windows for touch. And suddenly, it wasn't a gimmick. It was a feature people actually used. By the early 2020s, it became weird that the MacBook didn't have it. Adobe pros wanted to sketch directly on screen. Architects wanted to mock up designs. Designers wanted iPad Pro experience with max power. The market was screaming for it. And Apple kept saying no. That stubbornness worked when Apple had no real competition. But now, Microsoft's Windows laptops with touch are better every year. The iPad Pro steals Mac customers who just want a tablet that works. What finally pushed Apple over the edge? It's not complicated. Apple's been working on a touchscreen MacBook for 5 years or longer. The engineering was solved years ago. But the company was waiting for the right moment, the right chip generation, the right market conditions. Except that moment never came. Microsoft kept shipping better touchscreen laptops. Dell's XPS line added touch. Even HP made it work smoothly. And Apple kept stalling. Inside Apple, there was probably an engineering team saying we're ready to launch, while product teams kept pushing the date back. Sound familiar? It's the classic tech company dynamic. The engineers finish the product, but marketing and executives are waiting for something else to align: a chip launch, a redesign cycle, a press event. Months turn into years. And by the time you finally launch, the window has shrunk. So here's what probably happened. Someone at Apple looked at the data and realized that waiting for the M7 would be a mistake. Launch now with the M6, get the feature to market, let creators start using it, gather real feedback. Then improve it with M7 when that ships next year. It's the opposite of Apple's perfect product on day one strategy, but it's the right call for a feature this complex. This flexibility itself is a big deal. It signals that Apple's willing to ship feature-complete hardware on its own schedule, not the chip calendar. That's a meaningful change. So what will people actually do with a touchscreen MacBook? The obvious answer is everything iPad Pro users do, but with Mac's full power. Sketch with Procreate, mock up PDFs, edit videos and drag clips around the timeline. But there's something deeper here. A touchscreen MacBook isn't trying to replace the iPad. It's trying to expand your input options. Think about the workflow. You're working on a document and need to swipe to the next page. Or you're editing a photo and want to drag a slider with your finger instead of moving the trackpad. Or you're in a meeting, annotating a shared design in real time. These work on a trackpad, but they are clunky. They are faster and more natural with touch. Adobe's full suite benefits massively. DaVinci Resolve for color grading, being able to adjust curves by touch is huge. Logic Pro for music production, touching a fader feels right. And here's what gets overlooked. Not every Mac user will want to use the touchscreen. Some will never touch it. They'll keep using trackpad and keyboard exactly as before, and that's fine. Apple's not forcing anything. But for creators and professionals who spend hours on detailed, precise work, having touch as an option changes everything. It means the MacBook becomes a tool that adapts to how you work, not the other way around. That flexibility is powerful. It's not about choosing between Mac and iPad anymore. You get both experiences in one machine. So how does the touchscreen MacBook compare to what's already out there? Let's start with the iPad Pro. If you want a tablet with touch and stylus, the iPad Pro is phenomenal. But it's an iPad. It runs iPad OS, not macOS. That means you're limited to iPad apps. Logic Pro on iPad is stripped down. Final Cut Pro isn't on iPad. Serious multitasking and window management are still behind macOS. So for professionals who need macOS but also want touch, the touchscreen MacBook solves that problem perfectly. Now let's talk Windows. A Dell XPS 15 with touch is a great machine. It runs full Windows, you get everything. But here's where Apple has an advantage: integration. The trackpad on a MacBook is still better than any Windows trackpad. Build quality is usually higher. And if you're in the Apple ecosystem, having a touchscreen Mac that syncs perfectly with your iPad and iPhone is huge. It's not that the Mac is better at touch than Windows. Windows probably caught up years ago. It's that the Mac is better at everything else, and now it has touch too. As for the iPad Pro, some will still choose it because it's lighter and more portable. But for anyone who needs Mac software and wants touch, the choice just became obvious. The touchscreen MacBook isn't meant to beat iPad or Windows at their own games. It's meant to be the best of both worlds. By launching now with the M6, Apple's finally delivering on that promise. Here's what's interesting about Apple skipping the M7 cycle for this launch. It tells us something about how Apple's priorities have shifted. Traditionally, Apple announces major hardware changes synchronized with chip releases. The new MacBook arrives when the new M series chip is ready. It's predictable, it's orderly, but touchscreen MacBooks are a bigger integration challenge than just a new chip. The screen, the digitizer, the OS optimizations, the gesture support, these aren't things that sync neatly to an M series calendar. They sync to when they are finished. And Apple's apparently decided that finished means ship now with the M6, rather than wait another 6 months for M7. This is a tactical choice with strategic implications. First, it suggests Apple's engineers are confident enough in the feature to ship it. They're not hiding it behind a waiting period. Second, it means consumers get the feature sooner. You don't wait until next year, you get a touchscreen Mac this year. Third, it might mean the M7 arrives with fewer changes than usual, since the form factor revolution is already shipping. Or it might mean M7 gets repositioned as the performance upgrade, not the feature upgrade. Either way, this is Apple saying features and design matter more than chip cycles. That's a meaningful change in strategy. And it might be the start of a new pattern where Apple ships major hardware innovations on their own timeline, not on the chip release calendar. That flexibility is huge. So here's the key question: how does macOS actually use touch in a way that doesn't feel forced? Windows learned this lesson the hard way. Windows 8 tried to force touch on everyone, and it was a disaster because the OS wasn't designed for it. You need to think carefully about when touch makes sense and when it doesn't. Apple's already got experience here. iPad OS has gesture support built in from the ground up. 3-finger swipes, 2-finger pinches, long press menus. So the touchscreen MacBook probably borrows from that vocabulary. You might see 2-finger swipes for navigation, pinch to zoom for documents, maybe long press for context menus. But here's the key difference from iPad. On a Mac, you have the trackpad right there. So touch isn't the primary input method, it's supplementary. You're working with trackpad and keyboard, and occasionally you reach up to interact directly with the screen. Think of it like a designer who primarily uses a keyboard and trackpad, but occasionally picks up a stylus. The stylus is optional. It's for specific moments when direct input makes sense. For the Mac, those moments might be dragging sliders in creative apps, tapping buttons while your hands are already positioned on screen, or gestural navigation through documents. What won't work well is trying to do everything with touch. That's the iPad's job. Apple's talented enough at software to make sure the touch features feel natural and fast, not bolted on. Once you use it for a few months, you'll probably wonder how you worked without it. So what's the bottom line? Apple's touchscreen MacBook launching before the M7 chip tells us that the company has shifted its priorities. Form and functionality matter more than waiting for next-generation silicon, and that's actually good news for Mac users. It means Apple's willing to move faster to deliver features people want. No more 5-year waits for the right moment, but it also raises interesting questions about what comes next. If Touch is coming to MacBooks, which models get it first? Just the Air and Pro? What about the Mac Mini or iMac? And more importantly, what other form factor changes have Apple been sitting on, waiting for the right time? A foldable MacBook, a MacBook with a trackpad that's also a display. Those might not be science fiction anymore. They might just be waiting in Apple's labs for the right cycle. The touchscreen MacBook is the statement that the cycle has changed. Apple's not waiting anymore. That change ripples through everything. For creators and professionals who have been begging for touch, this is validation that Apple was listening. For casual users who never wanted touch anyway, nothing changes. Use your Mac exactly as you always have. But for the tech industry, this is a moment. Apple, the company that resisted touchscreens longer than anyone else, has finally admitted that the future of laptops is multimodal input, and they're making their move.